So today we're doing lesson 2.8, major compromises of the US Constitution. So you had two groups of people. You had the Federalists who supported the strong central government, and you had Anti-Federalists who were against the strong central government. You also had large states versus small states. You also had slave-owning states versus non-slave owning states. So there's a lot of compromises that finally came together in the creation of the US Constitution. So the Constitutional Convention took place in Philadelphia in 1787. George Washington presided over the convention. It took place in the summer, and it was so hot. They didn't want to open up any of the windows because they were afraid people would hear what they were discussing. And so they all sat in this hot room with the doors and windows shut tight so that no one could hear what was going on. And this is one of the more famous paintings of George Washington presiding over the Constitutional Convention. So the first of the great compromise that we're going to talk about is the Virginia Plan versus the New Jersey Plan. And this had to do with representation in Congress. How to make sure there was equal representation between big states and small states. So Virginia being a large state, so here we have Virginia. So they were a large state. They wanted representation based on population. So the bigger you are, the more people you had represented, and this is called the Virginia Plan. They also believed in three branches of government. The judicial, the legislative, and the executive. New Jersey, however, being a small state, so here we have New Jersey. They wanted an equal number of representation. Because they were small, so they wanted everybody to have the same amount. So we came up with the Great Compromise. And what the Great Compromise said was that we were going to have two legislative branches. So the Senate sits on the north end. So this side is going to be the Senate. And the Senate is based on population. Or I'm sorry, the Senate is, I'm so sorry, let me erase that. The Senate is an equal number of representatives. Each state gets two representatives in the Senate. Then you have the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives is based on population. And so if you want to pass a law, it has to be passed by the Senate and by the House of Representatives, meaning that states that have large populations get say, States that have small populations get a say. And so, therefore, it kind of distributed the power between large states and small states. Now, another issue in the US Constitution that is never spoken of is the issue of slavery. Never mentioned in the Constitution. In order to pass the US Constitution, they needed the Southern states to agree. The Southern states wanted to count their slaves as part of their population to have a stronger representation in Congress. The Northern states did not want this to happen. So, the South wanted to count slaves in the population. North did not. Because if they counted the slaves, then that would mean they'd have a larger population, which would mean more representation in Congress. They would have more power. The North did not want the South having more power, but at the same time, the North realized that the South had to have something because they needed the Southern states to agree to this new Constitution. So what they said was that each slave would count for 3/5 of a person for population for representation. So for every 5 enslaved individuals in the South, 3 of those individuals would count towards the total population of the state when it came to evaluating for representation. And your assignment is going to deal and go into more depth on why this happened and the implications of this. So our new government was a federalism government. And that is the idea that power was divided between states and the national government. And this was important to know because remember, some people wanted a strong central government, others were afraid of a strong central government. So this was a way to kind of divide the power a little bit. We also ended up with 3 branches of government. We have the legislative branch, which passes laws, legislative. We have the judicial branch, which ensures laws are constitutional. Then we have the executive branch, which enforces the laws. And because of those 3 branches of government, that resulted in what we call checks and balances. And the goal of checks and balances is to prevent one branch from having too much power. So you have the legislative branch, and again, they make the laws, but they also can override a presidential veto. So then we have the executive branch, and they carry out the laws. And if the legislative branch makes a law that the president doesn't like, the president can veto it. But if it's a really important law and Congress really feels passionately about it, then they can get more individuals together to vote and override a presidential veto. So they can check and balance each other's power. Then you have the judicial branch, which interprets the laws or makes sure the laws are constitutional. And if a law gets passed that they feel like is unconstitutional, they can say it's unconstitutional, and the legislative branch has to go back and take another look at that law. So this is how they all, and you can read through the descriptions here to kind of get a better idea of how they all check each other out and how they all balance each other out so that not one group has too much power. So today we focused on the major compromises in the U.S. Constitution, primarily taking a close look at small states versus big states, the Virginia and New Jersey plan, looking at northern states versus southern states and the issue of slavery that was never once mentioned in the U.S. Constitution, but then led to the 3/5 compromise with how we were going to count slaves. We also took a look at checks and balances in the three branches of government and ensuring that not one branch has too much power and how they divided their power up amongst the three of them.